welcome to Get Nisty, the series that breaks compliance out of the checkbox trap and turns it into a real security advantage. No fluff, no FUD, just practical strategies to make compliance work for your MSP. I'm Jared Kasner, and I'm joined by my co-founder of Blacksmith InfoSec and co-host of Get Nisty, Michael Zabarski.
Hey, everyone.
This is our first in our wow, way to start things off strong. All right, I love it. This is the first in our recorded podcast series where we'll be tackling 2 topics each week to break things down into manageable bites. All of these questions come from our listeners, partners, and friends who submit them at blacksmithinfosec.com/ask. So without further ado, let me ask our first question, which comes from an anonymous listener. I've heard about the CIA Triad. What is that, and how does it apply to a compliance? Is this some sort of spy thing? I'm sort of hoping that this is a little bit of a joke with the spy thing, but Mike, you want to explain what the CIA Triad is?
Yeah, so the CIA Triad is how you keep everything secure, really. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So you want to make sure that people don't have access to things if they don't need access. That's the confidentiality piece. The integrity piece is make sure data or objects don't change unless they're supposed to change. And the final one is availability. Is your data available when you need it? So let's break this down and talk through this a little bit, Jared. So confidentiality-wise, think of it as, you're sitting at home, you have a nosy sibling, they want to read your diary. How do you keep that confidential? You lock it. Now, most of those diary locks are easily pickable, but you do your best. So lock up the diary, protect the data. From a cybersecurity standpoint, you encrypt the data, you separate it so not everyone has access to it, you don't make it public. What else do you want to add, Jared, here?
So the encryption is not just encrypting it at rest, meaning while it's static on the disk, it's also encrypting it while it's in transit, right? So we want to make sure we're not using things like HTTP. We want to make sure that the traffic is going HTTPS, right? So anytime data is flowing in our systems, we want to make sure that it's encrypted from end to end, and then while it's sitting on disk. You use the concept of a lock and key for your diary. The same thing is true, right? Password protecting files, especially things that are sensitive, and segregating that data to make sure that things are separated out. Strong passwords is a really good idea also, right? Password 123 doesn't really fly, right? And so making sure that you're doing the right things and from a security standpoint to kind of lock down that data and make sure that people just don't have access to it.
The other piece of that, Jared, speaking of strong passwords, is MFA, right? You want to make sure that people accessing it are the people that should be accessing it. So again, just making sure there's MFA, strong passwords, encryption, all of those security best practices that I'm sure you guys have heard of time and time again, have coalesce and come together to create that confidentiality aspect of the data of the CIA Triad.
Awesome. So what about integrity, right? You talked about how that's making sure that things don't change unless they're supposed to. When are things supposed to change? When are they not supposed to change?
Yeah, you just do the right thing. That's integrity. No, so integrity is making sure that your data doesn't change. Like you don't want to have $10,000 in your Bank of America account and you log in, all of a sudden it says you have $2,000 and you're like, what happened? Well, lack of data integrity. So whenever data changes, it should be an authorized change. You want to make sure that whether it's, again, data or software, you're looking at the correct data and looking at the correct thing. That can be done by doing hash comparisons to make sure the file that you pull down off of some torrent site, please don't do that, is the correct file, right? There's ways you can validate file hashes to make sure that it gives you're looking at the right file. Same thing for file hashes, right? You can create an Excel document, have that file hash, and if someone goes in and changes that hash is going to change. So now you know something has changed in there. You can also look for audit logs to look for changes, right? So if you have a database of some sort, you can look at, hey, why was Jared in this database making changes? He shouldn't have access to this data. And then raise a security incident to figure it out. But that's really what integrity is. think of it again, also digital signatures, right? So you can sign software, you can sign documents if you need to, and again, making sure that that is correct and it has not changed and will not change. Like going back to all of your e-signature providers as well.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think you, at its most simple or basic level, I think about the version history in Microsoft Word documents or Google Docs, right? I can click on a single button and see the whole version history and who changed things and what changes they made. That's sort of the audit aspect that gives that file some integrity. That tells me I know who was in there, what they changed, and how they changed it, right? And so that's the most basic version of this file integrity. Is how do I ensure that what I'm looking at is the latest
Correct.
version and correct, right? And so, I think you talked about your bank example, and what Bank of America, I have not had any problems with yet, but you pick your bank, right? Your bank is doing a whole lot of stuff in the background to make sure that the balances that they are displaying to you have high integrity, right? They want to make sure that you trust them. And so integrity really is the foundation of trust when it comes to this, right? Confidentiality is hiding the information that shouldn't be hidden. Integrity is the foundation of trust. It's how do I trust that what I'm looking at is real and accurate?
Yeah, and kind of going back to the sibling diary example, just to tie everything together with an e-bow, making sure that when you do look at your sister's diary, that she doesn't have some sort of second diary where you're looking at stuff that she's planted there and not her actual real diary.
Cool. All right. So you said the third piece is availability. What does that mean in this?
Availability is really straightforward. It's is your data available for you when you need it? Is your network available for you when you need it? If your company's network goes down and you can't do any work, availability has failed you. And everything else at that point kind of goes to waste as well, right? Like if the data is not available, it doesn't matter if it's confidential or correct because you can't get to it. And so really, that's why it forms a triad, because all three of them need to be correct, right? You want to make sure that it's secure, so only people that are correct have access to it, that it's correct and not random data, and then it's actually available so you can actually get to it so you can do your job. And so again, if you have a database and you haven't built in redundancy and the database goes down, guess what? It doesn't matter the data in that database is correct. It doesn't matter that no one else can get to it, because guess what? You can't get to it either. And that's not helpful for business processes. And a lot of this goes back to business continuity, disaster recovery planning of, hey, how long can we live without a service or a piece of data? And what kind of resiliency do we need to build into it to make sure that that data is available?
Yeah, let's use the siblings diary, right? What's the equivalent here for the siblings diary? Is this they hid it so well that they can't even remember where they found or where they left their diary? Is that sort of the availability equivalent?
Probably. I don't have a good connection for that one. Way to call me on it. But yeah, no, I mean, like realistically, yes, it's and I've done this 100 times, right? I find something, I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I know where this is, and I put it somewhere super safe. And then my wife will come to me and say, hey, where is this? I'm like, in a very safe spot. No one knows where it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just making sure that, again, diary or whatever else is available for when you need access to it. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm going to bring back the trust word again here for just a second, because I talked about trust and the integrity, where I need to believe that or like have strong confidence that the data I'm looking at is accurate. But if I don't even have the ability to see the data, I'm going to lose trust also, right? So again, we'll use the bank example. If I try to log into online banking and I can't even see my balance, that's going to start to erode trust in my bank and their ability to maintain a service, right? So that availability question really is part of that trust mark also. And so we've got the CIA triad now. How does that factor into compliance? Right.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about security, but how does that factor into compliance?
Yeah. So, I mean, security and compliance go hand in hand, right? You can be secure and not compliant, or you can be compliant and not secure. And we kind of talk about that all the time. Really, the idea here is, as you build out your policy sets, as you figure out which framework, risk management framework you need to map against, depending on what vertical and what kind of business you run, at the end of the day, really what you care about is, do I have my data? Is it correct? And only the correct people have access to it. And you'll see this no matter what framework we're going to be looking at or talking about throughout all the frameworks, right? There's going to be some sort of data management. If you're running a business and you have some sort of HRIS system to manage your employees, you don't want to get their social security numbers publicly available for the whole world to see. If you have their routing and bank account information in your HRIS system, and all of a sudden that information changes due to an authorized change, guess what? Now their direct deposit is going to some sort of threat actor or somewhere else. Again, so integrity plays in there. Availability, same thing. Like if you can't process payroll, guess what? You're going to have some unhappy employees. And really it goes past the HRIS system. It goes into
every. Don't like to work for free.
I mean, some people I'm sure like working for free. But it kind of goes into every single aspect of the business, right? You're trying to close a big deal, and Microsoft has now that you can't email your proposal to someone. Guess what? You're not going to be happy, etc. Or you want to email proposal, you send the proposal to them, and guess what? The numbers in the proposal are incorrect, and now you've signed up to do this job that should have been $100,000 of income for only $10,000. Again, it goes back to the integrity.
Conversely, you lose the deal because you added a zero, and they say, "There's no way I'm paying it." Like you want to charge me $1 million when your competitors are all charging $100,000, right? And you're losing business as a result, right? So it's.
Although I think I'd rather lose the business than sign up to do the business at a 90% discount.
Yeah, fair. I don't know. Either way, it's pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
Either way, it can be pretty hard on the business. So. All right. Well, I think we've thoroughly answered that question. Any other last thoughts before we move on?
I think the main thing is kind of, again, just thinking about the whole network, the whole data sets, all the business systems, and thinking about how do you implement the CIA triangle for them, right? Get them MFA in place, make sure that you have secure authentication, do your user audit reviews to make sure that the right people have access to it. That'll cover confidentiality as a good starting point. Integrity wise, again, check those audit logs, see who's accessing systems, make sure that it's the correct people accessing systems, making changes, etc. And then from availability, work with the business to figure out, hey, how much downtime can they sustain? How much data loss can they sustain, right? One of the things you guys will hear as we kind of go on this podcast in the future will be things like RPO and RTO, so recovery point objective, recovery time objective. So recovery time is, hey, how much downtime can we have? And recovery point is how much data loss can we sustain? And we'll discuss that in the future podcast. But yeah, just again, go through methodically and work alongside the business and figure out how do you roll this out.
All right. Excellent. Well, thanks. You want to go ahead and read our next question?
Sure. This is from Brandon, who's one of the MSPs we work with out in California. He said, a lot of my clients are doctors, dentists, restaurants. Many of them operate on razor-thin margins and tell me they can't afford to be compliant. What should I tell them?
I mean, first of all, if you have doctors and dentists telling you that they can't afford to be compliant and they're not HIPAA compliant, we've got bigger problems. The reality, though, is we see this all the time, right? There are so many small businesses that look at the state of affairs. They say, I can't afford a chief information security officer. I can't afford the tools that are out there. I don't know how to become compliant. And then they'll get an MSSP or a vCISO or somebody that comes along and gives them $100,000 price tag to become compliant. And they say, their heads explode. And they say, of course I can't afford to be compliant, right? Like there's no possible way that I can do this. And like my businesses can't sustain that. And so like that, this is a really common problem to have, Brandon. Like we see this over and over and over again. So what do you tell them? The first thing is, don't worry, it's no big deal. You just walk away. No, of course not, right?
Yeah.
Right. The reality is, you can take the approach of, let me just scare the crap out of you and tell you all the bad things that can happen. Hey, if you're not HIPAA compliant and you have an incident, we're talking $500+ per breached record or per lost record. And you'll end up on the HIPAA wall of shame and blah, 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 and you can scare the crap out of your clients or your prospects. Now, I like to tell people, guess what? If you're telling a scary story, that you find somebody who can come along and tell a scarier story, they're going to steal your business every single time. Instead, if you can look for a message of optimism and hope and becoming that trusted partner, you can embed yourself, and it's a lot harder for somebody to come in and tell a rosier story than you can tell, because you're already in there and trusted. And so finding that rosier story. And so, Mike, maybe you can talk about some of the benefits that come along with compliance and why it's really not that expensive.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things, and I really like the way you kind of framed that of rosier story. I also say just being that, and we hear this a lot in the MSP space, trusted partner, right? Hey, I don't want to scare you. I want you to be more successful. So if you're working with, a doctor, a dentist, etc., and they say, hey, I really can't afford this. You're like, look, it's not too expensive. It's going to be a little bit of a time investment because you have to have some sweat equity in this, because they have to own that security program. You can't own this for them. But realistically, it's, as we said earlier, it's not super complicated. It's complicated, but it's not super difficult. And so if you can break that down for them and make it not as complicated, well, now you have something that's not complicated and also not difficult. And just let them start eating those bite-sized chunks of it until they become compliant. But talk to them about things like, hey, stuff is changing. States are putting in regulations, etc. We want to prepare you for that. And so it's not a, hey, this is scary. It's a, hey, we want you to be prepared so that when a state regulation comes down, or HIPAA is this year updating their regulations and making them more stringent, we want you to be ready for that. And you don't have to be 100% today. But guess what? If you're at 90% and a new regulation comes in, we can fill the last 10% pretty quickly versus starting at 0 and trying to get you to 100. Just minimize that cultural change fatigue. Make sure that they're not seeing a giant price tag all of a sudden, because all of a sudden they have to put in whatever, a SIM, a SOC, etc. Right? Get the foundation in place, get them most of the way there, and then work with them to get them the rest of the way. And that way, when some regulation comes down, you can say, hey, you're already 90% there. Let's get you the rest of the way. You're enabling their business to grow. Or if they get a contract and all of a sudden, I know it's not really going to be a doctor or a dentist, but it might be a doctor or a dentist if they have a contract with a hospital system. And the hospital system all of a sudden is implementing a more robust third-party supply chain risk management program. And all of a sudden they're demanding that all these businesses align to whatever. Now, you could lose that contract. Or, again, if you've already been working with them, you're now enabling their business to get those contracts and sign them and make that the differentiator between them and a different doctor's office or dentist's office. We see that a lot with restaurants and PCI as well, right? Where a lot of small restaurants are not PCI compliant. They they just do not do it. And so, again, just working with them and figuring out how do you minimize their risk, right? Because right now they could be taking credit cards over the phone and through their website and in 20 million different ways. And all of a sudden they have to do this massive PCI overhaul. But if you work with them and you say, hey, let's scope this down, let's figure out how you can take credit cards in a more meaningful way. Now you've enabled their business to conduct business more easily, and also deleverage their risk, because now all they have to do is look at SEQA and they're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things that I wanted to pull out of what you talked about there, right? So the first one is HIPAA is this funny thing where as long as you are making meaningful strides towards compliance and showing a good faith effort, you're not going to get into massive trouble, right? And so now it does require a good faith effort. But the good news is MSPs are already doing a lot of the right things for their clients to get them to be HIPAA compliant. They're already putting in encryption and firewalls and the right sort of tools, the right sort of controls to put things into place and move their clients towards HIPAA compliance, even if the client is not there today. And so the logical next step is, all right, if I have a lot of these pieces in place already, can I document what those pieces are, and can I show a plan for how I'm going to complete those last little bit, right? And so I think a lot of what I'm seeing with MSPs is they just don't even know that they're 80% of the way or 90% of the way towards HIPAA compliance with their clients, or even for themselves, right? Because they're having to sign a business associates agreement with their clients because they're providing services and maybe even have access that maybe they shouldn't have into the patient records. But if patient records are being stored in the SharePoint folders and things like that, they might have access that they maybe shouldn't. And so making sure that all of those pieces are in place. And so there's a lot of really good things that MSPs are doing today. And one or two little steps, and we'll do a deep dive into HIPAA compliance sometime in the future here, where we can really demystify a lot of this and break down each of the controls for HIPAA. HIPAA is not a very large framework, and so just kind of breaking down what's included in that sometime in the near future here. But that's really a good example. And then, Mike, you talked about PCI compliance and how a lot of restaurants are not PCI compliant. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy is they really could be without, and actually probably not just reduce risk, but probably also reduce their costs, right? If they're taking phone orders and jotting down credit card information over the phone, guess what? Now they have to have somebody who's answering the phone and taking all of those online or those phone orders, putting their clients at risk because they're writing down the numbers and then inputting them into whatever POS system they have. If you instead upgrade their POS with them, they're probably going to get better deals on their point of sale system. They're also going to be a lot more secure, and they can send people to their website to do those online orders, which then means that they're not having that labor cost of somebody answering the phone. That labor cost can be distributed and put into other aspects of the business, right? So you can actually start to improve operating margins for your clients like if you understand their business and are able to do things to help them move things forward. And so this is, we probably need to have a complete separate episode at some point here. And I think I saw a question actually in our backlog about QBRs and strategic business reviews and things like that. So we will definitely get into that at some point in the future here. But helping your clients understand what's coming, or helping you understand what your clients' needs are, and using that to drive not just the technical initiatives, but also the security initiatives, and using those two things to sort of dovetail together and move things forward. It's just a great way of working with your business and improving trust.
And I will actually tie this back to the CAA Triad for a second.
Awesome.
I actually had an incident recently where I used a third-party website to order from one of the restaurants. And when it was delivered, it was completely the wrong order. Like, not completely, but it was missing chunks of the order. And so I'm like talking to the delivery guy. I'm like, hey, look, you're missing 2-3 items off of this order. He's like, no, this is the order. He's showing me the order. And I'm looking at the order he has. I'm looking at the order that I have in my phone that I put in. And they're not the same. And so this third-party site that we end up placing the order through completely sent the wrong order over there. So going back to integrity, making sure you're looking at the correct information. And it was all good. They kind of figured it out and they fixed it, but that meant 2 trips for the delivery driver, lost time, right, etc.
Hungry, cranky kids. We've all been there before.
So yeah. The other piece here, realistically, also, Jared, is just making sure that, talking to them about not just compliance risk, but just overall organizational risk, right? There was one of our partners working with a client recently, actually, and the client was really pushing back about having a log for a visitor log for their premises. So when people come, they're like, hey, we don't currently do this. We don't have people sign in. Do we need to do this? And so the partner actually called back and had a nice conversation with me. I'm like, well, look, forget about cybersecurity compliance for a second. Let's forget about that requirement from a visitor log perspective. What happens if there's a fire? You don't know who's in the building. What happens if something is stolen? You don't know who's in the building. There's so many different risks that are organizational risks that are outside of cybersecurity compliance. And this is why all of this becomes an organizational risk conversation. how do you limit the organizational risk? What controls can you put in to say, hey, I know you're worried about this. Let's do something about this. And you can frame it as that, right? Don't just talk about the ones and zeros in cybersecurity. Talk about the people aspect. Talk about everything else. Like all of these cybersecurity compliance frameworks, for the most part, extend beyond cybersecurity. They extend to the rest of the business and how they conduct business. So really, again, partner with the business and help them limit their own risk. And to Jared's point, like somebody can easily come in and tell a scarier story, but if someone comes in and says, "Hey, this is scary," and your client is sitting there saying, "Like, cool, I guess it is scary, but these people help enable my business by reducing my overall organizational risk and making my business work faster, cheaper, etc." They're not going to leave you. It doesn't matter how scary the story is.
Yeah. You're talking about how to talk about organizational risk. One of the things that I find really makes a big difference when you're talking organizational risk with your clients is use their language. And I don't mean talking about you've got an Indian restaurant and speaking Hindi with them. What I'm talking about here is like if you got a restaurant owner who's looking at this and saying, well, why would I bother with multi-factor authentication? Like I need to be able to type in my code or just take orders really quickly. Hey, great. I totally get that. But let's look at your own business, right? You're serving alcohol. One factor of authentication is looking at somebody's driver's license saying, yep, you're old enough. You also have black lights so you can look for the seal. You've got things so you can scan the barcodes and verify that it's a real ID. You've got ways of having extra authentication on those IDs again, it's about minimizing risk. And so if you're already doing those things at the bar, if you're talking to a bar owner and you've already got the bouncer out front that's providing some sort of physical security, it's hey, these are all things that you can do to help reduce the risk for your business and make sure that you're not serving underage, but also it's not just about the serving underage people that's a risk to your business. It's the credit card theft. Because guess what? If you start getting Yelp reviews saying, hey, my credit card information was stolen at this restaurant, that's going to take your business also, right? So looking for those ways to minimize risk and talk about, hey, look, we're not doing this to scare you. We're doing this to help you. And here are the things that, like, here's a whole class of problem that goes away by implementing these security features for your business. And again, using the language that they understand around, again, if it's a bouncer or a restaurant, talking about bouncers and ID checks. If it's a doctor's office, talking about how you're checking they're going to check their insurance to make sure that the customer can, or that the patient can pay, right? It's the same idea of doing multiple factors of checks along the way and putting the right controls into place to protect your business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that about wraps it up for today. Jared, what should people do if they want to get their own questions answered?
Head on over to blacksmithinfosec.com/ask. With that, thank you for joining us today, and tune in next week for more practical advice on compliance. Thanks, everyone. Get nifty.